Okay, hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for actually joining me today and actually reaching out. And finally, we've got our episode on.
Yeah,
I'd like
thanks
to
for having
give,
me.
yes, no problem. I'd like to give our listeners today an introduction about yourself. I'm going to read a little bit from Podmatch. Okay. So, listeners, we have Stephen Avent today. He had close to 2 decades of elite level canine training, focusing on obedience, aggression control, behavioral modification, protection training, turning potentially killer dogs into loyal family members. Okay, this is interesting. He has since stepped away from the dog world and found passion as a mindset and lifestyle coach, teaching a blueprint of discipline, fitness, nutrition, and mindset development. So, Steven, my name is Nicolette. I'm actually the creator for that podcast called You're Worthless. Read that again. Juxtaposition of your very soul. So, Steven, how did you find yourself training canine? What was your journey?
I mean, I always had a passion for dogs growing up. When I was very young, I ended up getting a dog basically as early as I could and quickly realized that I had no idea what I was doing. So, through years of sort of being tortured by trying my best to raise a dog with no formal knowledge of how to do it, including going to some local, dog obedience classes, but not really having any success, I came across a company that I ended up later working for in South Carolina. Um, that I worked alongside for 3.5 years and basically fell in love with the process and recognized the difference in the species as a whole when they're actually trained the way that they should be. So
Really?
I then saw like the overall experience that you could have and the bond that you could develop with a dog and recognized the fundamental difference between what this offered and sort of the general narrative that most people view as pet ownership. And from
So,
there, it was just, I couldn't get enough. So it became a lifestyle.
wow. You're actually the first person on my podcast to be talking about training dogs. Like, growing up, I used to have dogs back home as well, back in my hometown. But it's like normal. We don't need to we don't need to train them. It's like okay, but yeah, they're leash, so they're on leash, so it's bad. So I'd like to understand. Can you walk me through the process of training a dog, like a proper process? Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
ideally speaking, this even starts before birth. I got to the point where I was training my uh, my dogs and then breeding them, and then taking the puppies from these trained dogs, which inherently trained easier. It passes through the genetic markers.
No
Um,
way.
and then so from there, I'm influencing their development from day one, including things like teaching them not to jump up and just general dog mannerisms. And then it just sort of escalates from there. As they're maturing, I'm increasing the formality of the training into basic obedience. By the time they're about 4 to 6 months, the expectation increases straight through to advanced obedience around the 6 to 9 month mark, where I start gradually extending the expectations into long leash and then off leash, and basically developing a single command response, regardless of the environment, on and off leash. And so, when done properly, we basically develop the dogs so that they never learn that they can get away with not listening. And we work
Oh,
it in a process that rewards them heavily for following through. And there's a correction base for not responding. And this is all sort of dependent on the maturity and age of the dog.
so have you ever been given a dog to train, which I mean, I hear you. You're training them from when they were puppies. So have you ever been asked to train like a matured size dog? And well, let's just say the people that they show, the TV show, they show that these dogs are lethal, or they're dangerous. Like, have you ever been, you know, been asked to train those kind of dogs?
Yeah, definitely. I've worked with behavioral modification and aggression control as well. So when I say the explanation from the puppy or even pre-puppy development, this is my ideal. I prefer working with preventative training opposed to corrective
Mm,
training. And this goes straight through into the coaching as well. I mean, anything that we do preventatively is always easier and more
yeah.
thorough. But of course, that's not always the case. And so I've had exceptional success and experience with rehabilitating dogs as well. Now, this comes down to the environment that they're in, and then basically being able to be that much more on top of what you're doing, because they need to understand that their entire world and the expectations are changing. And so often when it comes to aggression, for example, it typically comes from either a dominant protective nature or a submissive fear-based nature. And so
Ah, yes, yes.
establishing which one it's coming from really depicts the trajectory of the training. And definitely the dominant protective nature is much easier to rehabilitate, because we're just looking to sort of harness something that's already very confident, and if anything we're looking to reel it in a bit. Whereas when we get into submissive and fear based, now we really have to subtly um, develop their confidence and build trust. And so, depending on what's happened in this dog's life, and even once again the genetic components that have been passed down, that can be extraordinarily difficult and take an abundance of patience, knowledge, and consistency.
Wow. So you touched a little bit about training as well as how that relates to your coaching. That's actually one of my questions for you. How does dog training actually help develop people? That's one. And number two, I know that you've already shifted your, I would say, your career into mindset and development, coaching development. So, how does dog training has helped you shape your coaching program to date?
Definitely in many ways. I mean, right off the start, when I was training dogs, I noticed that my clients working with their dogs consistently and doing that process properly were actually able to develop out of things like ADD and anxiety just through some of the dog training programs specifically. So this was nothing to do with human development or lifestyle coaching or mindset development. This was
Okay.
exclusively just focused on training the dog, and inherently it helped develop the people too. So,
Mm,
starting from there and then transitioning into this, I mean, one of the things that really gets in the way of a lot of people when they're looking to develop themselves is that we often think too much. We complicate things
yes.
too much and we look for things to be perfect before we can proceed. Whereas one of the benefits and one of the beauties of working with dogs is that they don't question in the same way. They're looking at a very black and white world. And once we can develop their world to be the ideal sort of format, they fall into place and they thrive. And the reality is, when people do this, we do too. If we're able to just sort of step back, in many cases, from our ego or from our past stories and just focus on what it is that we need to fix in our life, we find that we can really accelerate through it quickly. And so, definitely things like behavioral modification as a whole, and developing consistency and formal practices definitely carry through as well, because with a dog there's no day off, and there's not even
Yeah.
a moment off. They are learning at all times, and so they're either training you or you're training them. And with people, once we learn to develop that same program where we are 100% on doing 100%, the best of our capability at all times, this is where we can really see major change in our lives.
Okay, let's dive into that a little bit more. You mentioned about people just now. why do you think that we can never have a 100% success rate training people as much as we train dogs? I just want to hear it from you. Although I
Yeah, well,
think
I mean,
it's
it
the
basically
obvious,
comes
but yeah.
to free will, right?
Yes,
Um,
like
we have free will and we have the option to choose. And as soon as you have that, you have convoluted concepts, you have misconceived ideas, you have laziness, you have like an array of things that play a role and prevent us from being successful in the way that we could be.
mm,
And often, right down to once again, which I just touched base on, is that we get stuck in our past stories. And we are so focused on living in the past that our brain doesn't allow us to really release and let go of that past in order to move forward and develop to be the person that we really could and should be. So, I mean, the primary difference between, developing a dog and a human developing themselves really does come down to that free will. And if we could manipulate that in order to give the people what they want without giving them the choice of failure, which is really what we're looking to develop through discipline, that's where once again we get to see the success and see those monumental gains and rewards that people are really striving for and wanting.
so would you be able to break down like what are these key things that people need if they were to maybe, okay, say number one, scenario one, enroll in your program, or number two, perhaps just start, just a simple start.
So, yeah, number one, I would even put into just a simple start.
Yeah,
It's just about making baby steps and just working towards the goal that you want, not expecting that you're going to achieve this monumental success day one. Too often people are comparing themselves when they're just getting started to somebody that's been doing something for years. And they
yeah,
expect to have that same outcome and they want to be just as good. I mean, that is just not realistic. So if we can accept where we're starting and accept that we're having the intention to develop to be the person that we want to be, we can start basically stacking wins and building our self-confidence and giving ourselves the reward that we need to continue to build towards that person. So the biggest thing is just taking a look at your life and figuring out even just one thing that you can remove from your life to make it better.
right. I think we're gonna take a step back. So my podcast talks a lot about self-worthiness, losing yourself and finding yourself again. Alongside it, some existentialism crisis that I myself had, and also perhaps other listeners that's on this podcast. So I would like to ask for you, have you ever had have you ever had an experience of maybe personal loss or some traumatic event that actually um, perhaps pivoted you from where you were before in your life to where you are right now?
So I would definitely say that my life has been a series of events that sort of brought me through a path that ended where I am.
Awesome.
And
Could you
regardless of
orchestrate that?
how good or bad those series of events may have been, I wouldn't change any of them because I am ultimately happy with where I am and the trajectory that I'm on now. But I've
Mm.
not always been on this trajectory. So it depends on how far back you want me to go. You know,
We have
for
time.
example, my first childhood memory was me in grade one interrupting my mother having a conversation with her friend, and then I witnessed her having her first grand mal seizure, which I thought I had triggered, and I thought she was dying. So I'm not sure if you're aware of what that experience looks like, but
No.
it's quite traumatic for a child to witness. And so from there, you know, I can go into I had my biological father sort of leave when I was very young. I had a stepfather, sort of taken in his place years later, who did not like children. And so, there was developmental sort of situations that arose from there. And then moving into, later into my teens, of course, falling into lifestyle choices that would not be ideal for, anyone if I could choose them for them. And then those lifestyle choices sort of were exasperated when my mother passed in my early 20s.
Sorry to hear
And
that.
that would have been after about 16 years of fighting with brain tumors. So from that first moment through to there was, sort of her quest. Um, and at that point, I sort of took the victim role, although I wouldn't have seen it at the time in that light, and basically severely abused alcohol and various other things for about a decade following that. And then, sort of piece by piece, including from, basically the dog development period through to my current role, have been able to sort of manipulate, shed things, and redevelop myself to be the person that I am today.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being candid. Wow, okay. I'm sorry I didn't prompt you beforehand that I would ask those questions, but
Not
thank
a
you so much
problem.
for being open. I wanted to ask you another question, but I think I'm gonna come back to it. Okay, so you were saying about vices, about lifestyle choices, right? Why do you think people struggle with anxiety and depression these days?
With what, sorry? Anxiety and
Anxiety
depression?
and depression, yeah.
I think often both are a mixture of living in your past and wanting to control it and striving to control your future, as well as basically a part of you telling you that you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing in your present. And so
Mm.
I think too often we have these expectations that we can't meet, and then we're not meeting the expectations that we should be. And then we end up usually diverting ourselves to distractions, which just magnify the problem and sort of store it and have it build for later. And I think the combination of all of those lead us to some very serious situations of both anxiety and depression, because we're not typically resolving our issues and we're not looking to develop past them, but instead to hide from them.
So you said that you were in that kind of maybe I would say lifestyle for about a decade. And would you say was it difficult for you to pull yourself out of it? Because I know there are people out there they want to pull themselves out of it, but they just can't. They don't have the support, or they just don't have that willpower, but they know they need to do something about it. So, in your experience, how did you, I'm sure yes, the answer is always yes, you can pull yourself out of it. But how did you do it, and what's your advice to those people out there? It could, I mean, it's not just limited to drinking or drugs or anything. It could be,
No,
yeah, yeah, it could be anything. Yeah, so
so I mean that's a heavily loaded question, but
I'm sorry.
yes,
I'm
yeah,
just
uh, it was challenging at times. It was not a single trajectory that was just successful, and there were different stages that allowed me to shed different vices over the years.
mm,
Um, Now, I would say that I was also going at it in like a blind manner. For the most part, I didn't have guidance. I didn't have the support necessarily. Although I did have some support in my life, I didn't have anyone that was really uh, able to walk me through how a successful development could take place. So a lot of
Mm.
it was sort of, I would view almost like luck that I was able to achieve the reforms that I was able to achieve at those times, and in many of the cases. But for example, with the alcohol, when I did step away from that, I did go through a period of depression, or what I would at least classify it as it. And I would explain that is because I had basically just bottled up 10 years of emotion and 10 years of dealing with things. And then when I stopped drinking, it sort of just bubbled to the surface, and I had to process it all at once. And I think a
Mm.
lot of times this will force people to just go right back to the bottle or whatever it is that they've been using to hide from their issues. Um, at the time, I didn't really have that luxury. I had other things that I was responsible for, and I had focus. And so that focus and responsibility did help me carry through. And it sort of pushed me to make it through. Now, from that point on until more present day, one of the consistencies has been um, fitness. You know, I think that moving the body and getting things sort of going in those moments elevates your frequency and brings you to a place that we need to be on a regular basis. So, especially when you're in a low place, making sure that you're getting enough physical exertion to bring yourself out of it is almost in a literal sense that you are pushing the problems away, but in a sense that you're dealing with them rather than just hiding from them. So that one did help straight through, and you know, there's so many avenues nowadays that people can go to. You know, there coaching is something that was not readily available, you know, a decade ago. This is something
Yeah.
that is now, and there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of compassion and knowledge and the ability to help people fight through these struggles. So people don't have to do it alone anymore. And then I'll also even go to nutrition, you know, because that is one of the focal points of my coaching program. Uh, I am very aware of how much that can help. You know, if you're eating like crap, you're gonna feel like crap, and if
Correct.
everything else in your life is in that same realm, you know, you're just compounding it more with the food that you're putting in your body. So, you know, it's basically looking to maximize your success on every single level. So, developing the mindset, of course, is the fundamental one of all of them. But the fitness and nutrition enable us to really get to where we can. And, you know, so things like meditating, reading, you know, journaling, these can all be different avenues of getting our mindset and our body primed to have successful experiences with, you know, shedding these vices and developing back into a healthy lifestyle.
Thank you for sharing and answering those questions, even though that was a loaded one. Um, so I hear you saying meditation, journaling. Do you do all those things
I
besides
definitely do.
fitness? Yeah.
And I do on a daily basis.
Right.
So, you know, whereas for much of my life, I would wake up and my day was subjected to my emotions that day. You know, if I woke up sad, it could be a
Ooh,
heavy day. If I
that
woke up
is,
angry,
yeah.
it could be an angry day. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I, you know, have been fortunate enough to find this blueprint that I follow, and it
Mm.
walks me through a daily routine that develops each day to be the best that it can be. And then if I find myself slipping at points, there are things that I do to bring myself back to where I want to be. And this, of course, is for myself, but also for everyone in my day, because I'm much more pleasant when I'm following this lifestyle on a regular, consistent basis.
So, okay, since you touched on that, what does your day to day look like?
Well, I wake up at 5 a.m. every day. regardless of how I feel or what's happening. Um, and then I go through a series of, my morning routine, which does consist of, meditation, journaling, reading, basically a process of getting everything moving, and then a fitness regimen that I do once again every day, with the exception of Sundays sometimes, but they're still substituted with something else that's very physical, because I do think that it's just such a crucial part to our day. And in order to sort of make sure that every day is the best that it can be, I think that that's a portion of it that has to be involved. And then, so from there, it depends. I mean, I'm a full-time realtor and I do my lifestyle mindset coaching full-time as well. So it's a series of basically juggling that alongside with my life. I have a fiance, a house, we
Really?
stay active, we like to eat. So, just regular life stuff as well. My bedtime is not depicted by anything other than when my day winds down and, when I'm able to / when I'm tired enough to go to bed. It's the wake up time that's the essential part. And then, so even things like that, um, doing things that are difficult, because waking up early for me is not a natural thing. This is something that I forced myself to do for purpose, for an intention. And so, not that that's the only one, but the exercise, the waking up early, doing these challenging things intentionally so that we develop ourselves to be able to handle them. So that when hard things come into our day, we can handle those with finesse. We're preparing ourselves when times are good for when the hard times do inevitably come.
How important is sleep to you?
Um, I feel that I sleep enough. So I'm sort of in the middle on that. I do think that
Okay.
rest is important. I think that if I need it, I take it, especially, assuming I have the time and the ability to. Um, but I do think that there's other things that I prioritize over it at times. And I do
So,
think that, like, for example, when you're eating very clean and you're exercising regularly and you're keeping your energy up and your mindset is good, you're attracting and culminating energy. Whereas so often people are eating poorly, their mindset is poor, they're not exercising, they're depleted of energy as it is. So the necessity for more rest is that much more crucial because they aren't harnessing their energy properly.
so basically, it's interrelated. What you eat, therefore, and you move, and therefore you get enough rest. So the notion of 7 to 8 hours to you does not really apply 100%. It would I say that can I say it depends on how you feel, what your body
Yeah.
feel like. So it's like maybe 6 to 7, but when you feel rested, you'll be able to start your day just like that.
Yeah. And I use the example, and it depends on the individual what the thing would be, but there is always an abundance of energy inside of us. And so often, if you
Mm.
look at some people, it might be like Christmas morning or going to Disneyland. But if they know that they're doing that thing the next morning, they could sleep 4 or 5 hours and they are good to go. And
But it's
so,
not sustainable.
well, I mean, if they have things that are promoting that amount of energy on a regular basis, how
Mm.
sustainable would it be? And then, of course, work in the nutrition, the mindset, and everything else. And then I think the viewpoint starts to change. I think the factors influence the reality a lot more than people really take into consideration.
Hey, thank you. All right. So, okay, this one question here. Why looking good is not vain? You put this in Podmatch. I wonder why would you put that out? Did anybody come to you and say, "Oh, since you're very built, very you have the physique. Oh, he's now vain or she's now vain. But in truth, I mean, no, it's not. What's your opinion on that? What's your take on that?
Well, so I guess there's a couple layers to that. Number one, I think that like the way that our eyes are developed,
Mm-hmm.
we are a physical being. We
Yes.
appreciate beauty in a way that not every animal does. And I view it as a
Mhm.
blessing. I love sunsets. I appreciate the beauty of the world that we've been given. And so I think
Amen.
that inherently, us looking our best is a natural state.
Mm.
If we look at most animals in nature, they look in their prime for the vast majority of their life. And then, secondly to this, we feel best when we look best. And it's not necessarily because we look our best, but when we are in our healthiest state, we tend to look our best, we're glowing, our skin is radiant, and we feel the best inside. So everything always coincides. And, I'll have people throw out objections that, they have friends that don't eat because, these anorexia or bulimia, things like this, basically mental disorders that are connected to the way they look. But this is not the same thing. I mean, that's an unhealthy version of somebody that has an idea in their mind as to what might look best, and they're trying to attain it, but it's not health based. Now you're getting
Mm.
into more vanity. Whereas
Mm.
when we're perceiving it based on health, the two do tend to coincide in the sense that we do look our best. But it's not a trajectory of, you know, looking the biggest or looking the thinnest, or it's about being your healthy self. And so everybody's physique is going to fluctuate, but I don't feel that it is vain in its natural state, because it does inherently lead to us being our healthiest self.
Okay, that was very diplomatic. Thank you for covering that very delicately. Okay, so I'm gonna steer this towards a more a question that is more I guess that touches the essence of my podcast. Okay, so can you share any personal experiences or stories of your of self-discovery and how it positively impacted your sense of self-worth?
Hmm.
Hmm. Okay, I'm gonna. If you want me to break it down, there are actually two in that question. So it's number one. Can you share any personal experiences or stories of your own self discovery journey? That's number one. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that this has been one where, it's been stages that have come throughout my life. I would start, in high school, I didn't even realize how closed off I was. I didn't realize the impacts that had sort of influenced my life and caused me to change my course in order to appease others. So,
Hmm.
one of the things that has been that has come to my awareness more lately is that at various stages in my childhood, I lost my voice. And I lost my voice because, right back to that first situation that I mentioned with my mom, I was interrupting her when that happened. And as it proceeded, as I developed, there were other stages in my life where I was basically shut down when I would talk too freely, by people that were crucial in my surrounding. And so it wasn't until later that I recognized that the ability to share what it is that you feel and think is a gift. And it was something that had been closed off in me for so many years. And I sought to basically avoid exposing my inner self to people out of, basically fear of being shamed or shut down.
Judged. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that this is something that's very common in society as a whole. And it's something that really took, well, even going on social media
Hmm.
and forcing myself through the discomfort of talking openly on camera, where
Oh
I
yes,
had
thank you,
avoided
Stephen.
photos and video my entire life.
Really? Wow, you've come a long way.
Well, thank you. So that
So,
would be one.
yeah. Yeah, you were saying.
And then, so yeah, I mean, just allowing your true self to come out and flourish, regardless of the avenue. But that one has enabled me to sort of show myself in a more vulnerable state, and with the intention of sharing my story, my experiences, both in the negative and what I've dealt with, as well as the positive and what's helped me, in order to hopefully be able to give a path or shine a light on a path for other people to be able to sort of grow and develop, and find, a new lifestyle for themselves as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. You're doing good. You do good
Thank
work. So what keeps you up at night?
you. I sleep very well, to be honest. Um,
Second
but
person that said that to me. Great, great. It seems like
yeah,
I'm choosing the right guest to be on my show. Okay, that's
um,
good.
yeah. I mean, if you'd like to just know, like, the stresses that I carry mentally, is that more?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're open to share, I mean,
No, I'm open. I mean, like I just touched on, I feel that by sharing these things, it helps other people know they're not alone. It helps other people know that there are, others that they can reach out to, that they can connect with. And there's always, you know, regardless of how well somebody is doing, there's always something in their life that
yeah.
can be developed further, you know? So my struggles are probably very similar to most. I have family struggles at times. These are ones that I seek to balance. Um,
Yeah.
I have the typical striving to excel in work.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, I have that
especially
too.
yeah,
Because
especially
I
when
have
it is a
a
passion, which I
right.
assume yours is too. Like it it weighs on you more when things don't go as you'd like.
Because it's
So
significant
yeah,
in our life. Yeah.
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 If you're working a 9 to 5 job and you punch out at the end of the day, um, the job ends.
Mm.
I carry mine around with me always. And it's been like this with the dog, breeding and training, and it is very much like this with the coaching. So learning to be able to keep a division between my client's success and how I feel my success as a coach is going is one that is very challenging, because I see
Mm.
the best in all of my clients. I want them to achieve it, but I don't necessarily have the ability or influence to make that a reality. And so that's one that I struggle with, because although I can do everything that I'm physically, mentally, and emotionally capable of, I can offer them, whether it's compression or compassion, which would be the equivalent to the correction and praise with my dog training.
Mm, wow.
The reality is that not everybody is going to adhere to it. Not everybody
Mm.
is ready to grow in the way that they know they want it. That's why they reach out in the first place. There's a part inside of them that recognizes, this could be that path. This could get us to where we want to be, but not everybody's ready for it. And so my clients, for lack of a better term, failures or lack of adherence or lack of success at times is probably one of my biggest struggles.
Oh gosh, thank you so much for being vulnerable, Stephen. Okay, do you have a mantra that you live by?
So I have throughout my life.
Okay,
My original one used to just be enjoyment of life, not at the expense of others.
enjoyment of life, not the expense of others.
Not at the expense of others. And so at surface level, this sounds very easy, but when you start to dissect it,
Are you like at the expense of yourself, or is it just like do you take the statement as it is? Enjoyment of yourself is not at the expense of others. So enjoyment of life,
sorry,
right?
enjoyment of life, not at the
Enjoyment of
expense
life,
of
not at the
others.
expense of others. So what is the enjoyment of life then? I'd
Well,
like to
so
break it
here's the
down.
thing. So enjoyment
Okay.
of life at this stage, because that has developed a lot. I used to have the perception of, just having fun was one of the more valuable things in life. But as
Mm.
I've developed and matured and sort of my perspectives have shifted, I see that the enjoyment of life is really about being of service to others, treating yourself with the utmost respect, developing yourself to be the best person you can be, and ultimately living in a lifestyle that is basically healthy and love based. And so, that phrase can be manipulated in various ways, or at least evolved in various ways to really change to um, a more pure sense, which is how I would perceive it nowadays.
Thank you. Okay, so one last question. If you could have a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening and the world as your legacy, XXX dash Stephen Avent, what would it be?
Mm. Just one quote to leave with the world.
I mean, I've had people saying, "Oh, okay, I've got one for now." Oh, but then before we close this section, they said, "Oh, I've got another one." So I'll leave
I
it to
mean,
you.
ultimately, I think it's about, tying into what I just said, is
Mm-hmm.
to live a life based in love and not fear. Put your 100% into everything that you do at all times with no expectations being held on the back
Yes,
end.
that's very good. Yeah, that's very good.
And
Expectation because
basically strive to be your best self and then share yourself with the world.
perfect. I mean, those are very, we hear that all the time, but it's just sometimes so difficult for people to fathom or comprehend or even apply that to themselves. But like you, I also try to spread that message across through my podcast. And I think that we made this has been a very, very wonderful episode with you, Stephen.
Well, thank you. I
I
appreciate it.
Yeah. I think we're good with time. Usually my podcast is from 45 to 1 hour, but I think I got the gist of it. I got to know your canine journey. I got to know how you train a canine. Like that picture, I'm gonna use that as the profile in my social media. That's a Rottweiler, right? Is that was that a Rottweiler?
I don't
That
even know
brown.
the picture. Can you
You
show
know,
me?
in Podmatch, there's a picture with you and a dog. You were wearing glasses.
Oh, so
Yeah.
that, okay, yeah, that one's an double XL American Bulldog.
Wow, double
Yeah.
XL American. Wait,
So that's actually a
that can
client
kill?
of mine.
Can that kill?
He's a little lazy, that guy. He's very strong, but
Okay.
he wouldn't be my go-to if I was developing a protection dog. That's for sure.
Okay, sorry. So okay, I'm just gonna include this as like a bonus section. So the dogs, right? Like I'm very curious. So you train these dogs, and these dogs, do they go to like CIA or the agencies or FBI, and then these are the dogs that they carry to, maybe I
No,
watched
so
too much American shows, so
I mean that's out there. That's definitely out there. I did it
okay.
for families. Um,
Ah, so
so
you're okay, okay.
yeah, I developed dogs straight from just obedience through to protection training, but it was family based. And so the purpose of this was that a family, especially if they were sort of a high risk target type individual, could
Oh,
have their
really?
dog. Pardon?
Wow, really? Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
it's
so
like people of high, can I say high profile, and then they
yeah,
have
like I've worked with
okay,
NBA
okay.
players and politicians, police
Wow,
officers.
amazing.
Yeah.
I never
So
thought I'd be talking to people like this, like yourself. Okay.
and so the
Okay.
purpose was that this dog could be developed to be both a family companion and
Mm-hmm.
also, elite level protection dog that they could bring with them everywhere they go because the dog has to be good with children, the general public,
Yeah.
and other animals. But they have been developed and trained, so it ties right back into everything else, to be able to do what they may have to do if they ever are called upon. And so this is the same concept of training yourself or the dog to be capable of handling the most severe situations when things are good, so that if something does come about that, is challenging in life, they can deal with it. And so it's the same about developing ourselves when times are good to be strong enough to deal with the hard times when they inevitably do come. And with the dogs, most of the times it was enough of a deterrent just being present, that it wasn't necessary, but they were
I think we tied up perfectly.
awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen. I hope you have a
Thank
good
you.
day. Yeah, and I'll be
You too.
tagging you when this episode airs.
Awesome. Well, thank you
Thank you
very
so
much. I
much.
appreciate that. And take care.
Thank you. Likewise. You take care too. Bye
Bye.
bye.